My name's Adam McLaughlin, and this is the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast. Practical ideas to help your church build trust in your community. Welcome to the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast, episode 10. You can track down all of the show notes today at churchmarketingideas.com/010. I'm excited about the conversation today because while we put a lot of focus on getting our church guests to our church, while we put a lot of focus on getting our guests to our church, how we follow up with them is so important. Tyler Smith, the co-founder of Texan Church, is going to talk to us about that in today's interview. But first, hey, if you're listening and you love the show and you want to get more clips of the show and you want to check it out and find other ways to interact with other people who are listening to the show, why don't you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CMI Podcast, at CMI, like Church Marketing Ideas, at CMI Podcast on Twitter or Instagram. Let us know which you prefer. Do you love Twitter? Do you love Instagram? Do you like them both the same? Do you like them both for different reasons? Track us down there, Twitter and Instagram at CMI Podcast. Now, at the end of every single episode, we answer a question from a listener, and today's question is about whether or not having a blog on your church's website is worth the effort. So you're going to want to listen right to the end of the episode today and make sure you hear the question and the answer about if having a blog on your church's website is worth the effort. Well, without any more delay, I'm going to jump right into my conversation with Tyler Smith. He's the co-founder of Texan Church, the trusted text and email software to help your church thrive, follow up with guests, and engage your members. And you can check that all out at textinchurch.com. Hey, Tyler, thank you so much for hanging out on the podcast today.
Adam, glad to be here, man. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you, and I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy. For the listeners that don't know specifically who you are, they probably know about Texan Church. They might not realize, who you are specifically. Give us a high-level overview of what you're up to right now.
Yeah, so I help to run Texan Church. So we have the privilege of serving over 17,000 church leaders throughout the country. It's been this incredibly awesome ride. The ability to connect with churches all over the country, big churches, small churches, everywhere, leveraging a really simple technology of texting to be able to reach people in your community. So that is my main focus. We also have started doing the Engage conference, which is a conference around helping, especially smaller churches, to navigate technology in the church. And we all know that everyone says the church is 10 years behind in technology, and maybe that's true, maybe that's not, but we are doing our very best to try to fight against that so that we can help churches to leverage technology to reach more people.
Yeah, so anybody who's a listener of the podcast regularly hears about Texan Church all the time because a lot of our guests talk about Texan Church, and it's so great to see you. You're the face behind Texan Church. It's an honor to have you here, and I'm excited that you're here to chat today.
I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm grateful to be here.
So today we're going to be talking about the ultimate guest follow-up plan. And that's really at the heart of what Texan Church does, is gives us an opportunity to follow up with guests who visit our church. So tell me a little bit about, before we dig into the ultimate follow-up plan, tell me a little bit about why guest follow-up was so important, important enough that you chose to build a business around it.
Yeah, so I started out in a church plant. I was on the leadership team of a church plant here in Kansas City. My older brother is a church planter out in California. And so this was, 7-8 years ago. But I can remember I was leaving a leadership meeting where we had spent, it felt like 2 hours mapping out the perfect way that we were going to follow up with all of our guests. And I'll never forget this. We had this marker board. It was, jam-packed with every step that we thought should be a part of this that we were not currently doing. And at the very end of the meeting, my pastor says, "Okay, so who's gonna lead this? Who's gonna be in charge?" And nobody raised their hand, including myself. And I left that meeting angry. I was truly mad that we knew we had a way that we could reach more people in our city, and no one was willing or could make time in their schedule. And I'm throwing stones at myself there too. And so I'm driving home from this meeting feeling frustrated. And I'm going on vacation the next morning, and I got a text message from Southwest Airlines telling me that my flight was delayed. So my immediate response is, now I'm really mad, right? Now my vacation's messed up as well. And then I had this, what I think is an epiphany moment of like, wait a minute, if Southwest Airlines can follow up with their passengers in this really brilliant way, why can't the church do the same thing? So I pick up the phone, I call my older brother, and I say, Matt, I have the best idea ever. We're going to start to follow up with church guests the same way that Southwest Airlines does with passengers. And he says, Tyler, that's the dumbest idea ever. Like, that's not a one-to-one. Like, the church is not doing passenger notifications. They're not grabbing a bullhorn and screaming out information. They're building real, authentic, true relationships. And he was completely right. But we kind of chewed on that concept for a while. And after a few months, we discovered that it was possible to get a local telephone number and not do it in such a robotic or spammy way, but instead like have real conversation. And so that was how we started, was we had this idea that you could do guest follow-up in the same way, leverage some technology, leverage some automation, and then mix that in with human interaction. And fusing the two of those would be really profound. And so it was just this idea, this concept. And my brother and his church were willing to try it out. And sure enough, if you love on people, it has a positive influence on them, on their lives, and your ability to have a relationship with them. And that's something we already knew, right? Like, as churches, we know we just simply have to do these things, but life gets in the way. It's really hard to do guest follow-up effectively, especially when you're in a church plant that's under-resourced and you just don't have the time. So we kind of stumbled into this concept of how can you tie technology into the tried and true guest follow-up systems that everyone talks about, that knows about, but quite frankly are not being done in most churches. And so Texan Church kind of accidentally started out of that. It was built to help my brother's church and my church. And then they started to share it with other people. And so there was a moment where I had this personal ministry where I was serving about 50 churches doing their guest follow-up. So every Sunday night or Monday morning, I would get emails and they would tell me, okay, here's who my guests were. And then I would do the follow-up for them.
Wow.
And I loved it. It was life-giving to me. I felt like I was serving, and but it was also just crushing me because it was this, I had a full-time job. I had another business that I was running, and it was just too much. So I sent an email and said, hey, really sorry, but next month's going to be my last month. And then I got emails back of people saying, no, you can't stop. This is working. We'll pay you for it, but don't stop. And that was the first moment that I ever really realized that, wait a minute, what if we dream here and think way bigger than what you're doing right now, just this little personal ministry? What if you could serve not 50 churches, but 5,000 churches or 20,000 churches? And so that was the epiphany moment where we said, okay, we have a system that is working. We stumbled upon it, but it simply works. And so now it's our job as Texan Church, as our marketing team, is to influence and resource as many churches as possible with a tool that's now proven to work. And so that's why we believe guest follow-up is so important. Guest follow-up is my thing. That's my jam. That's what I eat, sleep, and drink. Texan Church does a lot more than that now, but that was the only reason we started, was to solve that one problem of how do you do guest follow-up, especially if you're in a smaller church. If you don't have the resources and the time and the money to be able to throw at it, how can you do this in a simple way, but be very, very effective?
Right.
So I think in this, and that's what we're going to be able to dive deep in and kind of share exactly what are the learnings that we've had from over 17,000 church leaders. So anything that I share with you, it's not because I'm smart. It's because I'm a good listener. So we have learned from so many people that have poured into what Texan Church has become. And so I can share some of those principles and core ideas. And hopefully that will breathe life into your ministry.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm so looking forward to digging into this because I think that a lot of times we put so much emphasis on how do we get people in the door and not enough emphasis on how do we get them connected once they came to visit, right? So I think the biggest hurdle is getting people out of their shell or to push past the fear and actually visit our church. And I think it's not doing due diligence and not stewarding the opportunity we have properly if we don't follow up with them. So I love the ultimate guest follow-up. And I'm curious if you've would talk a little bit about the 3 big mistakes that you see churches making in the ultimate guest follow-up handbook.
Yeah, so basically, when we've had the chance to work with thousands and thousands of churches, and when they come to us, the first thing we ask them is, okay, what do you do for guest follow-up today? What's that look like? And what we hear over and over again is, oh, well, we'll send out a letter, or we send them an email, or we add them to our newsletter, or we make a phone call. And all of those things are singular, so they do one thing, and that happens most of the time. Not always. There are times that it falls through the cracks. And so what we started to identify was that there's really three core areas that that churches are failing in their guest follow-up. And so one of them is inconsistent. And so that just means that life gets in the way, right? Like as a church leader, you have a million hats that you have to wear. And the last hat that we oftentimes pick up is guest follow-up. So if we have time in the week, awesome. We're on top of it. If you're super busy, things can fall through the cracks, and guest follow-up is one of those. No one knows that you didn't do it. Like it hurts our hearts. It hurts our soul knowing that we missed it, but nothing comes crashing down when we fail to do guest follow-up. And so that's one of the things that so often we see churches do is they just fail to be consistent in doing it.
Yeah, and
so they can have this great plan.
Time and resources is always the issue, right? And so 100%. Maybe a church has, the pastor's full-time staff, maybe there's an administration assistant, and that's like a huge majority of churches are there or would love to be there, right? So if you have the opportunity to meet with a family whose kid just got admitted to the hospital, or you have the opportunity to follow up with somebody who visited your service on Sunday, of course you're going to go meet with the family because they're already in your church and they're already friends, and your kids play t-ball together or whatever that looks like. And so I totally see the concern with consistency.
Yeah, and also I want to point out, when we talk about these big mistakes, this isn't to throw stones. So if you find like, ooh, that's our church, that's not it. I'm not trying to say, hey, you're failing. What I'm trying to say is, hey, here's an opportunity for improvement. So just notice that I everything that I say is with love and with trying to push you forward to do it better, not to discourage you. And so I think that's really important, because oftentimes as we feel it, we know we failed to get guest follow-up done this week. But I want to kind of flip that switch and help you to think about it in a positive way, and what are the processes we can have in place to make it way easier on us. Because that's really the only way we can overcome these mistakes is by leveraging technology to make it easier, simpler, faster. So that's what we'll get into.
Yeah. So mistake number one is inconsistency. Mistake number two, tell us a little bit about that.
So it's being irrelevant. So talking to them in ways that just simply aren't making sense, right? So a handwritten note makes a lot of sense to certain people. A form letter coming out that's just signed by the pastor, that is way less impactful than a handwritten note, because everyone knows somebody hit print on this thing for 8 of them or 10 of them or 100 of them. And then somebody signed it. Maybe it was the pastor, maybe it wasn't. We don't even know for sure,
right? Because
there was no effort put into it or no thought put into it. And so what we have to think about is, what are the ways that we can be relevant in today's world? And so I want to push you to think kind of outside the box and say, okay, I think there's actually lots of things we need to be doing. So a form letter, maybe it's not my favorite, but it's okay. A handwritten note, yeah, definitely. Make a phone call, leave a voicemail. They're not going to answer the phone. That's okay. Don't get discouraged by that, but leave them a voicemail. Send them some emails. Let them know, thank you for coming. We hope to see you back. We want to answer any questions you have. We're here for you. We love you. Let them know those things. Yes, send some text messages. You can friend them on Facebook. Like, there's a million different ways that we have to connect, and they're all relevant in different ways, right? So somebody who's not even on Facebook, you could send them a Facebook message, and that's not going to have an impact because they're never going to read it because they're never on there. That's an irrelevant way to reach out to that particular person. There's other people who live on Facebook, and that would be the perfect way. So what we have to do is recognize that we don't know what's the most relevant. So we have to be in all of the different channels, have an omni-channel approach so that we can reach out and connect with people in whatever ways they feel most compelled to do.
Okay, mistake number 3. Tell me a little bit about that third mistake, and then we're going to get into some solutions.
Yeah, so mistake number 3 is that it's woefully insufficient. And so what I mean by that is, oftentimes churches are doing just 1 or 2 steps. So it all happens in that first week after they miss. And when we first started Text in Church, I had the chance to sit down with a bishop in the United Methodist Church, someone who has grown several churches, someone I really admire. And he is a straight shooter. He's very, he's bold and honest. He tells you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And I didn't know him at the time. And a pastor had introduced me, and he warned me, like, this man's going to speak truth to you. So it might hurt. I don't know. So I sat down with him and I said, hey, look, we've built this thing called Text in Church. Here's what it does. We do, at the time, we do 2 weeks of follow-up. And he said, Tyler, I love the idea, but you've got it all wrong. And I said, I'm all ears. Teach me, tell me, where are we wrong? And he went on to explain that if you think that you can change someone's life pattern in 2 weeks with a couple emails and a couple text messages, you're crazy. You're wrong. Yes, life change can happen during a sermon. It can, but it doesn't happen for everyone that way. And so our job, the reason guest follow-up exists, is so we can connect with those people who have a life pattern of not coming to church. They have soccer on the weekends. They have basketball on the weekends. They have different things pulling them away. They stay up too late watching a movie, and now they're just simply tired.
Right.
Like, life is getting in the way. We have to reach out and love on those people for an extended period of time. So I'm here to tell you, you need to be doing guest follow-up for 6 weeks. And that might feel completely overwhelming. Like, how in the world would I do that? We're doing 1 week, and it's hard now. That's what we'll get into, is how you can actually pull that off. But by doing that, you're going to continue that relationship way into the future. So they come to church on Sunday. Our job is to stay in front of them for the next 6 weeks. So maybe they come back the next week. Odds are they don't. Maybe it's 2-3 weeks later before they ever come back. But if we can start to build a relationship with them, now they have a reason to come back. If they know a name at the church, they're infinitely more likely to come back than if they know no one there. So maybe they only know you because you sent them a text and you signed it, Adam. Maybe they only know you because they read your email. Maybe they only know you because you left them a voicemail. But when you compile all of those things up, now they get a handwritten note. Now they start to feel like, hey, there is someone there who cares. I want to get to know that person a little bit more, because what we're finding is people aren't coming to church for the first time for like random reasons.
Right.
Like they're coming for something happened in their life that gets them to come to church either for the first time or come back to church for the first time in a really long time. So like there's been a death in the family or a displacement. They've moved. They just got married. They just had kids, a diagnosis, like something in life has happened. It could be good. It could be bad, but something has happened. And so they're seeking out friendship. It's no longer good enough to be a friendly church. We have to help them to make friendship. And it's those connections, it's those relationships that keep people coming back to church. And that's not to say the preaching doesn't matter and that like Christ doesn't have place in this. That's not what I'm saying. But relationships are real ways that we can help to foster that and then give people time in the community. And that's when our faith can grow. So that journey it requires people, it requires community, and we have a role in that.
So I've worked with churches and I've done some consulting, and I always across the board recommend Text in Church. I hope my listeners understand I am fully endorsing Text in Church. This is, you didn't pay me to be on this show to sponsor an episode. No. I'm having you on because I know that more churches could build trust and impact their community if they used a product like Text in Church. Specifically Text in Church, but that's a different story. And so one of the things that I talk with a church when I'm consulting with them, the pastor or the leader, whoever I'm speaking with, usually says 6 weeks, man, we don't want to hound people. We don't want to bother them. And of course, we all understand that there's the opportunity to opt out. But what I found at the church that I served at is our 6 week had a very, very low opt-out rate because we were really intentional about the content that we provided. So talk a little bit about the pastor or the leader of the church who's concerned that 6 weeks is too much and we're bothering people and it turns into sales pitch.
So that's a real concern. And that's something that we hear often as well. I want to challenge you to think about it completely differently though, right? So like we're not sending messages trying to sell them on anything for that matter. What we're doing is trying to just simply care for them. Like they are a person, they're human, and we're going to reach out and in really human ways start to have relationship with them. And one of the areas that it really gets, we get more pushback around is, but you're using automation. Automation can't build relationships. And That's true. But it can start relationships.
Mm.
So all it needs to do is to send a message that says, really looking forward to worship tomorrow. The coffee will be hot. Hope I can see you. So that's a simple phrase, like it's no big deal. But what will happen is you're going to get responses back, and people are going to say, sorry, we're out of town. We're traveling this weekend. Or whatever, some excuse, right? They're going to give a reason that they're not coming, or they're going to come back and say, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great. And we honestly don't care. When they're not new into our church community, we don't care that they're there every week, because their life pattern probably dictates they won't be. But if we can start to have relationship with them, if they can tell us, I'm not coming, and we can then write back and say, that's awesome. It sounds like you're going to be in Texas. Why are you headed to Texas this weekend? And now you start a conversation. Mm-hmm. That is what we're trying to do, is to build that relationship. So when they get back from vacation, now they're in the pews on Sunday morning. And so that's what's super important, is continuing that conversation. And if you look at the secular world, I like to look at numbers. I'm a numbers guy. If you look at the secular world, have you ever opted into an email list? So you went shopping and you're at the Gap and you buy clothes from the Gap and they ask you for your email address and you give it to them. Have you ever noticed that they only send you 1 week's worth of emails? No, they send
never.
You 5 times worth. It's going to last forever. Like, they literally will never stop sending you emails until you say, I don't want any more. Okay. It can become annoying. Yes. But why do they do that? Like, it's not because it's fun for them to write those emails. They have looked at the numbers. They know the exact number of emails they should send you per week, per month, per year. That is all scientifically proven. And that's the number that they will send you. Every company out there is doing this. We as the church get nervous. We get scared that we're going to annoy someone or we're going to offend someone because we sent them an email. When is the last time a friend sent you an email or a text message and you were like, oh, Adam, really? You're sending me another message saying that you want to have coffee? Like, I would never do that. And that's not the emotion that humans go through. When a human sends you something saying, I care about you, I want to invest my time with you, that feels good. That's life-giving. That's not something that's going to detract from my experience. So that's what I want to encourage you to do, is the messages we're sending are very human. They're very personal. And we're just simply making simple requests. So we're just checking in on them. Hey, really looking forward to services tomorrow. Are you going to be able to make it this week? Like, it's just a simple question. Now they're going to write back and say yes or no. And again, we don't care the answer. We want to start a conversation with them. And if you can be doing that with all of your guests, like the national average says only about 10% of first-time guests come back. It ranges from like 6 to 20% is right. What national studies will say. But so somewhere in there, 10%. That's pathetic, first of all, right? We wish we could do way better than that. But it's also an enormous opportunity for us. So maybe your church is at 25%. You're like, oh, we're better than the national average. That's good. But what if you could be 35% or 40%? So wherever you are, even if you're already at 50%, you still want to be at 60. Like, there is a reason you're not connecting with those people. And if we can create systems to increase the number of folks that connect with our church and then stay, that is profound impact, not just on our community, but on our specific church. Because the more people we have, the more giving that will occur, the more resources, the more ministry dollars we have, the more of an impact we can have on our community and on the world. And that's really why we're doing this, is we want to connect people to Christ. And one of the ways that we do that is by reaching more people.
So I'm going to rabbit trail here a little bit. We visited 2 different churches and they both use text in church. And I know the communications person at both those churches. So one of the churches, Sunday afternoon after we visited, they sent out a text message and said, join us on Facebook, ! With a link. The other church sent out a link that said, hey, don't forget tonight is pizza with the pastor. Just wondering if you're bringing your kids, and we want to make sure we have enough pizza. And then it was signed by the campus pastor. Mm-hmm. Okay, 2 different text messages, 2 different responses, right? Texting is so personal. It's not like an email newsletter I signed up for. It's how my wife reminds me to pick up milk on the way home, or how a friend asked me if I want to go for coffee. Tell me a little bit about how we know what kind of content, or how can we build the best kind of content inside a follow-up strategy?
Yeah. So, and I would say this advice goes to no matter what channel you're using. So even in an email, we want to keep it super personal. And the way you do that is when you sit down to write a text message or an email that's going to be used multiple times, your brain will automatically want you to write this very generic thing that can just be blasted out to everyone, and it will make sense. And it ends up just being like you grabbed a bullhorn and you yelled out to everybody, hey, go get on our Facebook page. Okay. The other scenario was as though somebody sat down and was sending Adam a text saying, hey, Adam, glad you were here. We're doing pizza with the pastors tonight. Are you going to be able to make it? Right. So like those are fundamentally different ways of thinking about communication. Okay. So one was a one to many, use a bullhorn and talk to the whole world. The other was, no, I'm talking to one person. That's it. So one of the things that we like to teach when you're writing these, think about, like when you sit down at the computer, close your eyes and think about last Sunday. There was that family that was there. You can see their face. They were sitting right over there on the right side. Like, think about them. And write your message to them, to that one person. And when you do that, the words will come out completely differently. And that is how you build relationship, is in that one-to-one talking. So one of the things when I get to speak at conferences, my dad is a part of Texan Church. He was one of the co-founders. And he always gives me this advice. Every time before I speak, he says, Tyler, remember, you're not preaching. And for the longest, I never understood what that meant. Like when you, as a speaker, if you can connect with people one-on-one, then the impact on them is way, way, way better. It's also better for you because you feel better. Like you can feel that connection when you're doing that. I have the tendency when I'm speaking to a crowd to like grab the bullhorn and just start yelling to everybody, and then no one listens. And so it's a really fundamental shift is saying, no, we're not talking to the masses. We're talking to that one specific person or that one specific family. Write that message. And then yes, you will use it over and over and over again, but you wrote it one time for one person. So now when the next family shows up and they're a part of your guest follow-up, they're going to receive that same message that feels so personal. And then when you reply back, I guarantee you had two scenarios there. Only one of those you replied to, right? And probably only one of those you even took action on.
Right.
The one that you replied to, my hope is that they then replied back. And you probably didn't go to pizza with the pastors. You were just traveling and reaching lots of different churches and stuff. So you probably didn't go. So hopefully they wrote back and said, sorry, that's awesome. I understand you're traveling all over the country. That's phenomenal. We wish you safe travels. Like some kind of continuing that conversation and then blessing you. So there's a huge, huge difference in those two shifts of talking to the masses, talking to individuals. We always, always, always want to err on the side of going directly to one specific person versus leveraging a tool to do to the masses. We all fall victim of that with our emails. So we can shift this. So I'm a big stats person. So like a text message, your open rates are through the roof, right? Like 98% of text messages get open. 90% of them are opened within 3 minutes. Email is totally different, right? Like emails, we're lucky if we get a 20% open rate. Right. The difference that's happening there is we have all been conditioned that when you get an email, most likely that went out to 8 million other people. So it's not to you, it's not for you. It was just this blast of information. So we ignore those. They go into our spam filter, or we just really quickly delete them without ever reading them. Right. Your church newsletter falls victim to that because our minds have been trained that, oh, that's a newsletter, hit delete, and they never even read it. So I'm not telling you not to do newsletters. I do think they have a purpose, but it's not to get information out because most people are not reading them. And that's a major shift. And that's the reason for it is when you get a text message, hey, someone just sent me a text, right? There are some instances where we're getting spam, but for the most part, text messages are one-to-one. They're human. They're your wife telling you, hey, don't forget to pick up the milk. Like those are the conversations that are happening. And so we want to be a part of that as the church.
So I know that in this document, you've outlined 6 tools that are really helpful for follow-up. And I know you just touched on text message, and obviously the name of your company is Text in Church, but I know you work with way more tools than just text message. So give me the next tool on the list. Text is number 1. What's number 2?
Yeah, so email is really, really important. So you'll hear me dog on newsletters, but like sending an ugly email, like Adam, you and I, we sent some emails back and forth corresponding to set this interview up. Those were ugly emails. They weren't pretty.
Right.
Neither of us spent any time making them look good. It was just the information that we each needed. That's a personal way that you can do that. So sending personal, ugly emails is a great way to do it. So I would encourage you to do that. Also, email is like the most prevalent way that we communicate. So it definitely has a place in your guest follow-up. So don't get discouraged by thinking that no one's reading, only 20%. That's okay. You still need to put effort into that. Another one is a gift. And this one kind of feels a little bit strange, but if we can give our guest something, that's an opportunity for communication, for engagement and relationship building. So whether that's delivering a coffee mug to their home, this is one, it takes some effort, but this is my favorite personally. For every single first-time guest you have, if you have the resources to pull this off, somebody should drive to their home, should set a coffee mug on their doormat, ring the doorbell, and turn around and walk to your car. You're not there for a conversation. You're not there to creep them out. You're not coming inside to talk. You literally are leaving. If they happen to answer the door before you get to the car, you just wave and say, hey, it was awesome to worship with you today, and you're gone. That's the end of the conversation. Nothing else happens. Now they know someone cared enough to come and do that. So that has a really profound impact. I get it. It's not for everybody. That one takes a ton of effort. But a flip side of that is just at your welcome center, give people a gift. Give them a coffee mug. Let them know, hey, if you're new here, come stop by the welcome center. We would love to give you a small gift. So I think that has a big place. There's a million different ways we can do that. But I think it is impactful. And just the law of reciprocity comes in. Like when you get something, you now want to give something. And so that's important to just kind of play on is, hey, if we can give them something small, they're going to be willing to give us something small back. And maybe what that will look like is they're going to come back and give us a second chance. That's all we want is they want to come back, start to continue to build those relationships. And if we keep doing our part on the guest follow-up side and our hospitality is amazing, then we can have those interactions. So
Okay.
Another one,
Yeah, go ahead.
Another one is phone calls. So Adam, I don't think we actually agree on this one. I think I've seen you post it in guest follow-up. Making a phone call is a waste of time because no one's going to answer. It's true. No one's going to answer. Very few people will answer a phone call from a number they don't know. I still think it's worth the time because it only takes you 1 minute to do this and to leave a voicemail. Yes, there are some people out there who have a million voicemails sitting on their phone, but that's not normal. Most people don't. And so just having a voicemail of your pastor calling to say, hey, I'm so excited to see that you were at worship today. If you have any questions, reach out to us. Just something really simple. But that has a really profound impact on some people. It's not for everybody, but there are people that really do appreciate that. And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, let me jump in there. So my concern with phone calls is the expectation that somebody's going to answer. And as long as you go into it expecting that there are very few people who will answer, I think there is value to a phone call because of the opportunity to leave a voicemail. And I think there is value to a phone call because some percentage of people will answer that and enjoy the conversation. So I think there's value to a phone call. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't put all my stock into, I hope making phone calls on Monday brings all kinds of people back to the church next week. So that's my 2 cents.
Absolute truth spoken right there, Adam. I completely agree with you. And that's actually the case, I think, in all of the communication channels that we recommend. Like texting is going to get you the highest percentage of people are going to see that, right? But texting alone is not the answer. There are people out there that either don't check their text, there's a reason. And so it's not the perfect solution for everyone. And so it's really important that we're doing all of these because if you skip some, I would argue the more you skip, the lower your chances of actually connecting with someone. So be strategic. Making a phone call does take a little bit of effort. So if you're going to have to skip something, that could be one that you skip. But my urging would be no, like we should try to do as many of these as we possibly can. Another one is a handwritten note. Man, handwritten notes are old school. No one's doing it anymore, and that's exactly why we should do it. So we want to stand out. So when they go to the mailbox and they're used to just having a bunch of bills in there and junk mail, it's awesome to have a letter from a pastor or from a church leader, period, reaching out and just saying, hey, we noticed you and we hope that you come back. That has a really profound impact. Now, yes, like at my house, that's going to sit in the mailbox for a week before we go and check it, but eventually we will. So everyone is different, and that's perfectly fine. And then another one to talk about is a Facebook message. So if you can like them on Facebook, there's a way we can connect with folks there as well. That's one that takes a little bit more effort. You got to be a little more like planning ahead to be able to do that. But again, it's worth it. Each one of these little areas collectively play a really big role in making that happen.
So you touched on something there, Tyler, and I want to jump in because I want to relieve the fear for the church that says it's going to be too much work. Nobody's going to give us their phone number. We can barely get people to fill out a connection card as it is. So talk a little bit to the church that is concerned that implementing all this strategy is great, but we're going to have a challenge having people willing to give us their phone number or willing to give us their address so we can drop off a coffee mug. Talk to that church a little bit.
Yeah, so those are that's probably the number one question we get from churches and church leaders, saying simply, how do we get people's contact information? And the answer, it sounds simple, but it's a little bit, it can be challenging, as we all know. Like probably everyone listening right now is like, I wish we could get more of our first-time guests to provide their contact info. But what we have found, what we believe, is that the reason that people don't give you their contact info is they don't yet trust you. They just don't yet trust you. And so what we then have to do is, how do we build trust with people throughout a worship experience so that we can get them to do that? Another really big reason is that we never ask them for it. So many churches never specifically say, hey, if you're new here, welcome. We're so glad you're here. And then share a little bit about why you love this church. So you're starting to build a little bit of rapport with them. And then you say, hey, we would really appreciate it if you will grab that connection card or the pew pad or whatever your way is, and put your contact info in there. And the reason is, we want to reach out to you with some information about the church. Because if you're searching for a faith home, we would love for this to be your new faith home. We've got really amazing people here. In fact, the person you're sitting next to is pretty special. And you're going to find that out when you get to know us. And so you're telling them, you're breaking down all those walls, because it's so important that they know exactly what to do, fill out the connection card. And then what's going to happen is they're going to get some information about the church so they can make a decision of if this should be a new faith home for them. Like you're telling them all of those things, because otherwise, if you leave any of those out, if you never tell them what to do, they're going to sit there and be like, man, that place was awesome. Maybe we'll come back next week, but they're not going to hear from anyone. So they might come back, they might not. Statistics tell us they won't. Or if you say, hey, fill out the card, and you don't tell them why, their mind starts racing. They know that you're going to go sell their data, and they're going to, all these terrible things could happen, right? But if you tell them specifically what you expect of them and what will happen when they do that, you will tear down those walls. Now, here's the other piece. We teach that you need to make that request early in the service, okay? So within the first 5 minutes, you need to let everyone know who's there for the first time that they're welcome, you're glad they're there, and what they need to do, okay? So whatever that step is, somehow or another, give you contact information. But do not give up there, because it's only 5 minutes into the service. They probably don't trust you, right? If they're new to church, you're doing all this weird stuff. You keep standing up and sitting down, and you're using all these words that don't make sense to them. Those are tearing down trust, right? So they're not understanding exactly why they're there, and they don't feel that they fit in yet. Hopefully the sermon can start to fix that. The worship can help to fix that. And so by the end of the service, now maybe we have built up enough trust. And so now we want to make one more request. Again, if you're new here, we would love it if you would fill out that connection card. You can hand it to one of our ushers at the back, or come stop by the Welcome Center. We have a coffee mug waiting for you. Make some other type of request, of call to action, of saying, hey, do this. And if you do that at the beginning and at the end, you will vastly increase the number of people that will follow the instruction. We like to be in line with what's being asked of us. Like, not most of us are not rebels. Most of us don't like to not do what's asked. And so if you can ask that in a logical way, let them know what the end result will be, people will follow that. So yes, it's real. If your church is not having great success at gathering first-time guest contact info, think through that process. There's something that's happening either before your service or during your service that is breaking down the trust, not building it up. And so really think hard about what are all the things that you can do to build trust throughout that entire process. And then I would also almost bet that you're not making multiple calls to action to those first-time guests. Make sure that everyone who's new there knows that you are so glad they're there, you are prepared for them, and you expect that they will be back next week. Like that has to be part of our language on a consistent basis.
So I've got two sneaky strategies that I use to get people's contact information during service. So one of them is that we would use our text in church number to sign up for announcements or sign up for an event. And then if we saw a number that wasn't in the database yet, we knew that person at least was the first time getting into the database, whether it was their first time or not. They're probably relatively new to the church. So that was one strategy. Do we still have those training videos that I created?
Yeah, we do. I can link those to you.
Okay. Yeah. So I created some training videos for Text in Church to show how you can use your announcements and how you can use your welcome time to get people to give you their contact information. And so we'll make sure we link those to the show notes. The second thing that really bothers me, and Tyler, maybe you've seen another strategy that I haven't thought of yet, but the second thing that really bothers me is every time I sign my kids in, I have to give my contact information. And how terrible is it to know that I signed up to your church database for the first time to sign my kids in, but you didn't follow up with me, even though you know for a fact it's my first time bringing my kids. So, I think that using new signups in your family space, the other thing it does is it tells you this person has kids, this person has a 2-year-old, this person has, a 12-year-old. So you can follow up with ideas and content that specifically serve that person, that family. Tyler, what other ways or what ways are we not thinking of that you've seen to get people to engage with the Text in Church model?
Yeah. So by the way, Adam, you are the pro on this. So you taught the course that Text in Church uses to teach people how to do this. But one of the pieces that we haven't talked about at all is not using. So a strategy is to not use a regular connection card or a pew pad. Go old school. Instead, let's use some technology to make our church feel, especially if you're in an older congregation, you make your church feel more relevant for that young family that might sit down next to somebody who's in their 60s or 70s and they feel like, I don't know if this is the right place for me. I'm only in my 20s and I'm surrounded by people that are much older than me. So one of the things we can do is say, hey, if you're new here, just text welcome to the number on the screen, right? So you can have a slide that has a local telephone number, and they can then text the word welcome, and then they're going to get a text message back. It'll gather all their information. It'll put them into an automated follow-up sequence, which, by the way, everything we've talked about, you can do in an automated fashion, just leveraging an automated workflow. But that's really, really important because it can plant a seed in that person's head who sat down in their first 5 minutes, started to make some judgments, and they weren't feeling so great about this place. And then they see that slide come up and they're like, they are older than me, but we're on the same level. We're on the same wavelength. These are my people. And so I think you can definitely overcome that. Like age is not, it should not be a deal breaker by any means. So I think that's something that we can do to help to bridge that gap, but also knowing that, hey, young folks, they would much prefer to text in. So like, let me just give my family, for example. If you asked my wife to fill out a connection card, she would grab that thing and fill it out immediately. If you asked me to, I would pass. Like I would kindly pass. And if my wife was with me, she would take it from me and she would do it. If you asked my family to text in, I would whip out my phone so fast and be done texting before you even had finished asking. My wife would never do it. So people are different, and that's okay. And so I think it's important that we offer both options. So don't abandon your connection card because you want to do this new cool digital thing. I think it's a both and. So have both options because it's not a one size fits all. The world we live in is complex. We're not homogenous. We all have different patterns and things that just make us feel comfortable. That's fine. Embrace that, live into that.
Tyler, I so appreciate your thoughts on this. And I know in the ultimate guest follow-up plan, there's way more where we dig into the details. Plus, I think it's a really great tool, for a listener to pass on to somebody who's not listening, or maybe their pastor or their leadership to, see how the system works. So our listeners can find that at churchmarketingideas.com/text. And we'll make sure that we link to all that information there. But if somebody has some more specific questions for you, they want to connect with you, they want to get to know you, what's the best place for them to connect with you online?
Yeah, just come over to texanchurch.com. So just come to our website. And from there, we have different webinars that we do. We have a live demo that we do every week. Go there, go to our Facebook page, because we want to be a resource for you, whether you use Texan Church or not. So like that's our heart in this, the ultimate guest follow-up plan. Like, it's not just, okay, what are the problems that we're having? What are the strategies to fix it? But we also give you 16 templates that you can literally copy and paste and use. So this is a done for you follow-up strategy and follow-up plan. So literally every email, every text message, every phone call, we give you the phone call script, the handwritten note script, like everything is included in here, because what we have found is that if you do guest follow-up well, your church will grow. And that's what we're really passionate about, is to helping you to bridge that gap. So wherever you're at now, is there room for improvement? And if so, we would love to be able to facilitate that. So Adam, I very much appreciate the opportunity to share with you and your audience. And we would love to resource any church out there with all of our free stuff. And then if it makes sense for you to jump onto Texan Church, we offer a free trial as well. So just give it a go. And if what we find is, the reason we do it for free is we don't want your money if it's not a perfect fit, right? We want you to test it out, fall in love with Texan Church, and then we want you to realize that investment that you make on a monthly basis is having a profound impact on your ministry. The return on investment should way outweigh the little bit that you pay in a monthly fee for a tool that's going to connect you to your community in ways that you're most likely not doing today.
One last question, Tyler. If somebody wants to connect with you personally on social media, what is your go-to channel?
Facebook is my go-to channel. I am not the best social media expert, as our team will definitely attest to, but I do go on there. So yeah, Facebook, we have a Facebook group, the Texan Church community. So if you go in there, I am in there fairly often. Our team is there to answer questions. And then there's a whole community of folks that are trying to figure this stuff out and then sharing what works. Because that's what I think is we have to really embrace, is we're not all on islands. We don't all have to reinvent the wheel. Guest follow-up, there are strategies that are proven to work. All we need to do is find which ones work and implement them in a context that makes sense for our community. So sometimes I think as church leaders, we feel like we're on this island all by ourselves trying to figure this whole thing out. And I want to encourage you not to feel that way, not to go that way. Like this podcast is a prime example where you're bringing brilliant people together to share what's working in their church and in local churches. And all we have to do is listen to those ideas and then implement them in our church. And so one of the things that I'm infamous for saying around our team is, so what are you going to do in the next 24 hours? So if you learn anything, whether you're at a conference, you're listening to a podcast, it doesn't matter. If you are learning, if you're reading a book, you should have something that you're going to implement in the next 24 hours. Like that's a daily task of mine. So every morning when I'm learning, I'm going to write something down that I'm going to get done in the next 24 hours. And so I want to challenge you to do that. So hopefully there was one thing that you picked up on here, and you're like, yeah, we should do that one thing. Do that. You don't have to do all 6. If you've made a list of things, hopefully there were several takeaways here, but just pick one and get that thing done within the next 24 hours. Maybe you can get the other ones down the road, but getting started is super, super important. Small improvements over time make a massive impact.
Tyler, thank you so much for hanging out today. I really appreciate your time, and I hope our listeners have a lot to take away from this conversation.
Awesome. Glad to be here. Thanks, Adam.
Hey, Tyler, just tell us a little bit about what the Engage Conference is all about.
So the Engage Conference is an online, completely free conference that we put together to help church leaders navigate the technology that is so necessary in today's world. But what we're finding is so many churches just lack the resources, the time, the energy, the money to be able to navigate all of the technology that's just so imperative for us to be able to reach people. And so we've brought some of the best minds in the church space and the technology space all coming together so that we can focus right around how do you implement technology inside the church so that you can reach more people in your community.
Perfect. Our listeners can sign up for free to the Engage conference at churchmarketingideas.com/engage. Thanks, Tyler.
Hey, Adam. What is your take on having a blog on our church's website? Is it worth the effort? What kinds of topics should we cover? Thanks.
Okay, having a blog on your website, I think this is a really good idea, but it's definitely not a foundational type idea. So a foundational type idea would be something like making sure your church has a Facebook page, sending out a regular email newsletter, making sure your website is functioning. Those three ideas are foundational ideas. So if you're already overwhelmed in your church communications job, or you're a volunteer, or you're part-time, or you just don't have enough time to do all the things you need to right away, then I wouldn't recommend starting a blog. It's probably not worth the effort until you're at a place where you can be consistent with it. But once you're at a place where you can be consistent with it, then yes, I would suggest it's worth the effort. If you choose to do content that people in your church are actually searching for. So here's how we're going to do that. We're going to find out by going to google.com/keyword planning tool. So that link there will tell you what people in your area are searching based on words that you can type in. So you type in the name of your city and it'll tell you what are people searching as it relates to that city. So the blog really needs to be outward focused. And what can people do in your city? Where can they eat for free with their kids? What kind of parks would you recommend in your city? All that content helps people search and find your blog so they come to your website. Now, once they're on your website, you can do things like let them know about service times, or send them an invite, or send them more information about your church and what you can do there. You can also include your church in some of the blog content. So for instance, let's say somebody was searching 10 things to do for Christmas in your city. Well, maybe your church Christmas concert shows up somewhere on that list. And so you can integrate your content into what people are searching for. It's kind of a low-key way, or a more subtle way to get found in search results. And the other things you can do is you could do clips from your pastor's sermon and write about those. So maybe there's 3 bullet points and a takeaway that make a nice, 1,000-word, 1,500-word blog script. And you put the YouTube video in there. And now when somebody searches for those things in Google, they find out about your church and can get more information about not only the topic, but your church. And know that your church is a place where they can find that information. So again, this is really a higher level strategy. This isn't something you should feel obligated to do, but if you're ready to kind of add fuel to the fire of your communications, I think blogging is a great idea, a great way to do that. And even more so if you can find a volunteer in your church who could take some notes, who could take some ideas, give them an idea of a list of 5 things to do on a Tuesday night at your city, or 5 things to do with kids, or 5 places where kids eat free every day of the week, or I guess that would be 7. But find somebody in your church who can help you create that content, and I think it is a valuable use of time, as long as you have the other communications foundation pieces in place. That was a great question. And now if you have a question and you want to ask, just go to churchmarketingideas.com and click the button that says Ask a Question. We'll make sure we answer every single question, and we'll even feature some of them on our podcast. Coming up on the next episode.
So many things we do, whether it's on our phones or on our computers at work or whatever, we just check things out online before we take the time to get our kids ready for church in the morning, before we take the time to drive there. We're going to check it out to make sure this thing's legitimate. And so I think we just can never undersell the value of making sure that our website is accurately representing who we are, and welcoming in that moment, that we're actually connecting with people to be able to say, hey, we want you to come here, and this is a bit of a taste of what you're going to see, and we're going to answer some of those main questions. It's funny, it's a lot better than it was when we first started, but there's still so many church websites that just don't do that. And I think often maybe the platform hasn't allowed them to do that, or they haven't really invested in it. But I mean, I can't imagine how many people come to these church websites that we all know about that just say, you know what, this doesn't really feel like the right place for me, because I feel like this might be a little bit dated, or I feel like this, they're still talking about their Christmas Eve service in February or whatever it would be, right? And so I think we just want to make sure that we're investing the right time in there, because that could be the difference in someone saying, yeah, you know what, let's go check this out.